This beautiful pub is on Rupell Street, which lives on an estate in Lambeth, which is especially preserved. Unlike most of London, which has been hyper-modernised, Rupell Street, Thede Street, the surrounding streets in this Lambeth estate are kept as they were, and there are strict rules to make sure that's maintained. Now, the King's Arms was never actually called the King's Arms by the locals, which really highlights how important pubs are in the community and how the community treated this building. It was known as Bonces because it was owned by Mr. and Mrs. Bonce. So if you said to someone, "I'll meet you at the King's Arms," they'd say, "Where do you mean?" And they'd say, "Oh, no, I mean, sorry, Bonces." The pub still maintains a traditional aesthetic. Inside, it still has a lot of wooden features. It looks very traditional. Unfortunately, it's now cashless, so it has moved forward in time, if you like. But presentation-wise, for generations, this would look very, very familiar to people that lived here throughout the last few centuries. Now, during the Second World War, this place was a bastion of unity, if you like, and people really worked together. And therefore, places like Bonces would have been mobbed out, and there would have been a very much needed sense of release from the fear that was going on during the Blitz and knowing your family were away at war. And today, when we see pubs like this, on streets like this, we can actually take ourselves back in time, not distant time. Literally, we can go to the 30s and 40s in our minds and put ourselves in the positions of our own family members that would have lived and breathed in spaces just like this. So up until the 18th century, Lambeth was marshland. It gets its name because it was used for grazing and landing lambs and sheep. It wasn't until the early 1800s that this place really started coming to life in the way we know now. Before it became full of life, it was used for hunting, leisurely purposes, or for grazing. But in the early 1800s, we had the first Waterloo Bridge opened, which was opened by George IV during his regency, who would later go on to become George IV the King. And then later, that bridge would be replaced, built by a huge number of what's alleged to be majority, actually, women that built the final bridge that stands today during the Second World War. Now, a lot of the actual housing here is Georgian. And there is some confusion among some people as to what's Georgian and what's Victorian. Overall, it doesn't really matter because it's so well preserved that to us it's all the same, it's beautiful. At that point, you're splitting hairs. This is Thede Street on the Lambeth estate, which you can see has no cars on it. Now, for me, cars destroy photography in London. They destroy photography in any Western city, really. This street is probably one of, if not my favourite streets, and you can see why. Because it's not spoilt by pretty much anything. And when I take photos in London or anywhere, I always try to find a spot with no modernity. And this street has it all. It ticks all the boxes. And for me, it's an incredibly nostalgic place. And I don't think I need to give you a big spiel as to why. Now, it's also the case that a great many series and films are filmed here, such as Legend, the Craze film, and so on. And I feel that there's a specific reason for this. I don't think it's just because it looks nice. I think it's because everywhere else doesn't. And that's a point I want to lead up to as we start to conclude this video, which is a point I'm going to make in just a moment. So the Lambeth estate we're on was built by John Rupell in the early 1800s. Some pronounce it Rupel, but most of us all know it as Rupell. And the estate has strict rules to keep it as beautiful as it is. And many of the residents go out of their way to make it look that much more special. Now, when you're on these streets, whether it's Whittlesea Street, Rupell Street, you will see classic cars like this. And this is a Morris Minor, which ran from about the 40s to the 70s, right? And it's my belief that people are buying these cars because This is just me having a guess. Because they know so many series and films are created and filmed down here, that they're hoping that their cars are included in the feature. And I have no doubt that some of these cars will have probably been in a few of the series that you've seen without even noticing. Behind this car is an absolutely beautiful house, which is why you can see the debate is had over what's Georgian and what's Victorian. Even into the 30s and 40s, you would have to be able to pay X amount of rent beforehand. You would need multiple references to get in here. So to us, what would have been a time of poverty, if we was to observe how people lived, because these houses could have 3 to 4 to 5 families in them, and I'm not exaggerating. So that would have been a very difficult way to live. But even then, those people would have had to get references from other people. So it wasn't just any Tom, Dick or Harry that could move in here, and that's the same all the way down to this day. Now, for generation after generation, the residents here would clean their doors, clean their doorstep. This was a Londoner thing. I say that people did it all over Britain, but in London there was a meticulous effort to keep their porches and their doors clean. There was a real sense of appreciation for ownership. And if your door wasn't being kept up to scratch, then you'd be told off by the residents and, dare I say, the council. So instead of me chewing your ear off, what we're going to do is we're just going to walk down Repel Street, this is Repel Street itself, and observe the beautiful buildings on the right-hand side. So come with me, please, Dan. For a great deal of time, poets, writers, artists, they made this place home. And to this day, it still has a reputation for artistry, filmmaking. And at the end here is the only remaining business that's been there for a long time, which is this barber's. Obviously it's changed hands. Well, this baker as well, they've gentrified, they've updated, shall we say. But they are reminders of what was actually there beforehand that served the people here, that ranged through a series of classes. Because let me remind you, even when these houses became expensive, there were people that might have already been here that inherited those houses when they were a lot cheaper. So for a short time, you did see a variation of the classes as opposed to how expensive it is now. They really price people out. But there might be 1 or 2 residents left that these homes were passed down to them. But then again, would they really want to pay the rates as they increase these days? I feel that the most important point to make with a place like this, especially the way that the world is changing so rapidly, is that I find it very strange that this place has been so well preserved. There's very few places that resemble anything like this in London now. And this refers to a point I made earlier as to why film series and films are created in spaces like this. And for me, it's because the rest of London no longer looks like London, whilst this location, this estate here in Lambeth, is a very big reminder of what London was and should look like. Now, if we did this everywhere, then everywhere would look beautiful. It'd look majestic, wouldn't it? It shows that if we apply certain rules, then we can have lovely things like this. And for me, pretty much all of London should look like this. We do not need some of the new buildings, especially not where they are, but we're led to believe we do. And what happens is, when you do not look after places, as well as this place has been looked after, you get places like that, and realities like this. And you can see those buildings towering over the estate, and the cranes there representing that it's nowhere near finished. And if we turn around, you'll see some similar buildings which have been finished. And now it's become borderline impossible to photograph anywhere in London, even somewhere as beautiful as this, without modernity there to ruin it. Think for yourself. I'll see you soon. Take care.